it sounds like, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like you are a pretty big fan of world building and getting into the weeds of that stuff. You mentioned you're working a book about maps and all that, which is awesome. So first off, maybe we can talk about maps and maybe some of your thoughts about what's a great way for writers to go about some of that. But then also, if you have any kind of world build, like if you were like kind of new at this, you're like, I don't know really where to start, maybe some thoughts about that.
So just since we're talking about storytelling first, I'll touch on the second point. If you're looking into world building, you don't know where to start, think about what the story needs. You can do a lot of fun stuff in your world building, very flashy things or exciting ones or whatever. But if it doesn't serve the story, then it's distracting. It's a bunch of stuff that you have to explain that doesn't help you. That I think is one of the most difficult things people who love world building have to reckon with, is that you can't just throw the entire kitchen sink in most of the time. There are some worlds that just embrace being a kitchen sink, and that's great.
Yeah.
But it definitely, I think, like that almost requires, in some sense, like a comedy angle where it's like, yeah, some random stuff is going to happen and you just have to accept it, like almost like Terry Pratchett level stuff where in Feet of Clay there is a whole chapter told from the perspective of a bull, and you get a little bit of world building from like that perspective, just very briefly, randomly. So like I think that's the biggest point I could possibly give somebody, just kind of like in this context, is, don't just do whatever is cool. Like Rule of Cool is great, but try and make everything come back to supporting the narrative in some way, or like the themes in some way. Yeah, I think that would be it.
Yeah. I'm one of those. So my whole story idea started as world building. I had never once considered writing anything. And I was just kind of at my job, and I thought to myself, like, what if I took things like Avatar: The Last Airbender and mashed it with Lord of the Rings, and then added in that, like, I just kind of, this whole world idea started happening. And part of the reason I think it's just taken me so long to write something is I had to like find a story within that.
Yeah.
So like I think that's kind of if you start with that world building, either way I think works, but then you have to kind of, like, I didn't really have a main character, so I kind of had to figure out, okay, what is actually, like, is there even a story within this world?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the way Digital Extremities happened as well. I mean, I wanted to write about rural and remote places in a cyberpunk world, but that's not a story.
Right.
And so it was a lot of like, what kinds of stories do I want to tell? And actually, I looked toward literary fiction for inspiration mostly, and like, smaller scale stories like that, stuff by Jennifer Egan or Edwidge Jantika, people who are telling stories about, exes who are doing, awful stuff, or, a death in the family, or, a new marriage or something. Little moments like that, which carry such heavy weight, because it matters to those characters. And then kind of bringing in that world building and those sci-fi fantasy influences, and it's like, how do we elevate that to kind of exist in this place? Yeah, I think that's where I guess I agree with you, is my point.
Yeah, I remember very, very early on, like, I had just decided, like, I'm going to try to write something. Never had written anything before, never had, like, read a book about writing, never watched a video about writing. I never had even like I've never taken a creative writing class. Like I literally knew, I didn't even know why I liked the stories that I did like, like totally new. And I remember talking to my brother, who he also enjoys writing, and he would always ask me about my characters and their motivations. Like this, so I'd had the world and I was starting to try to figure out a story. And he's like, well, why would this character do this? And my answer was always like, well, I don't, like, they just do. Like, what, like finding out like why the story is actually happening was a really tough thing starting out.
That's still tough for me. Character motivation is tricky because it's such a difficult thing to create something out of thin air that people believe in, and someone that people care about and want to read about.
And it's hard for you as the creator to judge it, because so like I'll come up with a character and a motivation, and then I'll go, like, I constantly second guess it because I know that I created it, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I'm constantly like, I don't know if that is a good enough reason. Like, I think it is when I first say it, and then the more I talk about it, I'm like, is this good enough? Are people actually going to believe that that's,
Yeah, I don't know what to tell you there, man. But I will say I'm trying to listen to people more when they read my work. Listening to my beta readers and editors, and now people who are reading the final version. There's always been this kind of like anxious feeling where it's like, this actually sucks. You're making a mistake. But haven't gotten a rating lower than 4 stars so far. I'm sure it will come. I'm sure I'll get one eventually. I'm sure I'll get some 1 stars eventually. But I mean, the people who were interested in it and took a chance on it so far are saying good things about it. And I'm trying to just shut myself up and listen to them and not respond and just be like, thanks, and just end it there so that I stop talking.
It's that whole imposter syndrome thing of, it's like you do a thing, you put the thing out there, everyone tells you it's great, and you're still kind of like, I don't know.
And it's also like, I think it's important to take some time and reflect on the things that people are saying you did well. Like I like to ask people, like, which story was your favorite, or what part of it did you like, etc. And that is a way for me to tell, like, those are the things that I'm doing well. Whatever they didn't mention, I'm either average or not doing great in. And those are the places to improve moving forward.
And I think that people that are going to give, I think there's 2 types of like the criticism part. I think there's the type that is like, I'm just going to say something that's not constructive, and because I just want to say something negative about it, like kind of more like on the troll side of the internet. And then there's the people who, like, if they really want to give you actual constructive criticism, they'll give you some good things too. Like, it'll be kind of a more constructive, like, hey, you did this really well. Here's some things that kind of didn't work. Like, it'll be more of a better critique, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, there's always a point at which it becomes, critique is always great when it's done in good faith. And when the person is just mad, or like, they picked up the wrong book for them and they blame you for it. I don't know about that one, Chief.
Right. Well, I think most people too, like, if I pick up something and I read it and I don't like it, I just don't read it again. Like, I don't go to their website and I'm like, 1 star, and
the problem. But yeah, I mean, it's, you kind of need to develop a little bit of a thick skin. almost just as important is like, don't just weather the blows, but like be able to acknowledge, okay, that review is in good faith and they are giving me constructive criticism, and I should pay attention to that. This one is just a person who's upset. They're not giving constructive criticism. They found like one typo and they're like, oh, this book is trash. And it's like, all right, well, I'm just gonna ignore that now. It's you just gotta let it go. I don't know. Maybe my tune will change on that once I get some of those 1-star reviews. We'll see.
Yeah, we'll see.